formidable gentlemen with me. On my left is Mr. feb21, well-known to Central. On my right is Mr. Frank Miles. And we're going to be discussing a number of subjects today that really need the input of some very qualified people. And I will waste no time because the hour goes by rather quickly. The areas we're going to address today are: one, the falling oil prices have both a positive and negative impact. Positive for consumers who benefit from reduced foreign exchange disbursements, and negative due to the fact that producers responsible for a large labor force and monetary assistance to emerging nations will no longer take center stage. So I will start off with Mr. DeVoe, and so he can touch base on my first question, that is, oil prices have both a positive and a negative impact. Right.
Thanks, Michael. It's quite a puzzle to most economists to see that with oil prices tumbling from whatever they were, let's call it $100 only about 8 or 9 months ago, to the current level of $25, $26, all economies of the world have not benefited, and that benefit has not flown down instantaneously to their balance sheets. But it's a fairly convoluted problem, and as Michael mentioned, it involves lots of different aspects. In essence, a lower oil price is obviously good, particularly for consumers, as we're seeing here when more and more cars are on the road, gasoline is being bought, also the price of airline tickets, Liat, has come down, and there are a whole variety of areas in which oil prices have benefited the economy immediately. But the one other advantage is that if you go back over the years, certainly about 30 or 40 years, you will find that every single recession, and the word recession is now on everybody's lips, are we going to be in a recession? Every single recession has been triggered or brought about directly and indirectly by rising oil prices. You look at an oil price curve and it goes up, and then at the peak of the curve, immediately you get a recession lasting 1, 2, 3, 4 years. So when people ask the question, is there going to be a recession, in this time of falling oil prices, it is deemed to be very, very unlikely. But anyway, that's one of the good points. One of the bad points, which Michael also mentioned, is that many of our, maybe not traditional, but our newfound friends who assist us with grants and aid and so on, for example, the Kuwaitis and now the Saudi Arabians, they are suffering. They've enjoyed good times for a very long time. Their finances are in good shape. They always have a budget surplus, thanks to the tremendously high price of oil. Now the boot is on the other foot. And all of a sudden, Saudi Arabia, which was the country, the swing oil producer that really was responsible for the calamitous, from the point of view of the oil producers, drop in oil, Saudi Arabia is in not deep trouble because they have enough reserves to tide them through for about 4 years at their present deficit rate of about $200 billion a year. They've built up a sovereign wealth fund which will see them through. But they're still having to cut back expenditure, and among the expenditures that they will be cutting back on is foreign aid. So if we expect to get a lot of foreign aid from Saudi Arabia in the next few years, I think we're going to be bitterly disappointed. But there are all sorts of ramifications, and I wouldn't go into them here. I'd like the other speakers to comment. Basically, what is happening to the oil companies? Are they in trouble? Are the banks in trouble as a result? Everything flows from oil. It's a predominant commodity that affects the entire world. And one last comment I'd make is that we had a conference here entitled, I think, the Transition to Renewable Energy, which was very, very laudable, and people like Dr. Fletcher have to be commended on the work that he's doing here. But the faster the price of oil falls, the less incentive there is to switch from oil, fossil fuels, into the new energy sources of wind and solar, particularly solar, where the price has fallen exponentially, and solar and wind could be our savior in the next 30, 40 years. But if the price of oil keeps low, then there'll be a greater reluctance to move to the renewable energy. So, as I say, it's a very, very complicated issue.
Frank, yeah, on the second concern that I had, which is the positive for consumers who benefit from reduced foreign exchanges. My take is that money has been in the hand of the producers for many years. And for us who are consumers today, the immediate thought would be for us to invest immediately. But since we're not quite sure where the price per barrel will fall, it is difficult for a business person to make that decision immediately. As an economist, and what's your forecast? How do you view that?
The fall in oil prices will probably be of benefit to countries like ours simply because of the openness of our economies. We import just about everything, and to the extent that fall in oil prices will impact on those, naturally our foreign exchange going outwards is even less. But what we've got to go back to is to, if you will, the reason why the oil prices are falling, because this will impact a lot of movements at a global level, which is going to affect investment decisions. Because of the deliberate policy by the Mideast countries to keep pumping in an attempt to force the shale oil producers out of business, we're now at a level where a lot more oil is being pumped as required, and this glut has been highlighted by the fact that China is no longer pushing along as it used to. Thus we have this, if you would, in a sense, a race to the bottom. Iran coming on after the agreement with the US in respect of the embargoes, etc., and so on, they are in a hurry to get back the market share, and they will be pumping fairly heavily, and they've indicated that their aim in the short term is to regain market share, despite the fact that there's been some sort of agreement between Russia, I think, and Saudi Arabia to keep pumping levels at the levels of January. So we're going to be in this position, I think, for a while still. And it's projected it'll probably go on into 2017 and thereabouts. Now, that may seem good for us. It gives us some breathing space if we use the funds. Yes, if we use it intentionally, it's going to be pretty good for us. But the thing is that we have other things happening at a global level. As I've indicated, China is gone. Brazil, all the BRIC countries have their own financial problems. And because of the uncertainty in the oil markets, the banks have lent a lot of money to the oil sector. So they now are also in trouble from the perspective that people are starting now to move their investments out of the banks into looking into safer territory. So all of this now is out there, and it will make investors very wary of whatever we're doing. And in these parts of the world, our own region, we are already so highly indebted. Even as an investment area, we are not so attractive. As to where we're going to go down the line, it's still up in the air, but what it does is put a lot more pressure on us to do everything we do right. And this one error we make could sort of like bounce into the other, and the very thing that we're trying to do could not happen. Eventually, people will look away from these territories.
Tell me something, Frank. As a business person, I'm a small hotel owner, and part of my problem was the high energy costs from the electricity companies. But I'm happy to say that in the last 3 months, out of a $100,000 a month electricity bill, I'm down to $70,000, so there's a saving of $30,000. As I said earlier, I don't want to jump into the business any deeper than I am now, by being over-optimistic. But do you think it's wise, for instance, for, say, a hotelier in St. Lucia now, based on the fact that energy prices are dropping, that we should be a little proactive and move forward? Or this is, as I said, a time for reflection?
I think that this is probably a time to really go cautiously. Like I indicated, the world markets are turbulent. And that is the last thing an investor needs. You need a certain amount of certainty if you're thinking about investing. And there's really a great sort of uncertainty throughout the world. I believe that at this present moment in time, this benefit, this windfall that we're getting, it's a good opportunity to literally hold strain for a while, assess your opportunities, and in fact the government has a role here, because even in terms of, for example, gasoline prices, they're fairly low at the moment. I don't know the exact price per litre, etc. and so on. But what it has done, it has left a lot of monies in the hands of the ordinary consumer. Now, are those persons using that money well? When you look at the environment we're in, probably not, because again we have an open economy, just about everything is imported. So that benefit we're getting there is probably going all out shopping in Amazon.com or whatever. But the money is not being held. And is that to our benefit? No, because ultimately it's not going to stay there forever. It is going to go back up. And when it's going to go back up, I expect it will go up fairly sharply. Because once the shale oil guys get out of the market, it's going to be a totally different ballgame.
Now that you've mentioned that, Frank, something has cropped up in my mind, and that is, as you know, that we have a development bank which is presently undercapitalized. Do you think that the government itself should be proactive and say, okay, fine, there is that saving, a percentage of savings should be withheld by government and put into the central bank and monitored, or that's not a good idea?
I have been advocating that actually. I have been thinking the government should not really pass on all the benefits of the savings to the consumer. There should be a cap as to how far it should go, but those funds which are being held back, whatever it is, it certainly should be put aside to be used down the line, because things are going to change rather suddenly.
Right.
And I've advocated that publicly before, actually.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like yourself, I just heard last week where Russia and China have made a sort of a pact that they're going to Saudi Arabia and Russia, so that Saudi Arabia can taper down their output to stabilize prices. But remember what Saudi Arabia said earlier on, they don't want to lose market share. So how do you see that playing out, Fred?
That's an interesting one, and I think it illustrates the fact that behind, or in fact at the very heart of this oil crisis, lies the fact that it's a geopolitical struggle centered in the Middle East, which is the home of really cheap oil. Oil can be produced there for as little as $5 a barrel, whereas the rest of the world is up to 50, 60, 100. It's a geopolitical struggle between, well, you can call it Iran and Saudi Arabia, but within Islam, it is Iran representing the Shiites and Saudi Arabia representing the Sunnis. And Saudi Arabia and Iran both want to see each other brought down, and whether they'll be able to use oil as a weapon to do this remains to be seen. But the recent rapprochement between Russia and Saudi Arabia, I am told, for what it's worth, that they came to this conference both expecting the other side to cut production. Russia is the biggest producer. I think Russia is at 12 million barrels a day, and US 10, Saudi Arabia 8.5, and then so on. Iran and Iraq about 4.5 each, and they both expected the other side to come up with $500,000 barrels a day in cuts. When they found out this wasn't the case, they sort of fudged the agreement and they froze the output level at the present level. Mind you, this cannot take into account the fact that Iran has said that it is going to produce another 500,000 barrels a day right away to build up its infrastructure and have the money to do so after decades of sanctions. Yeah. So Iran is really the joker in the pack. But if I was to bet between Iran, with its larger, more aggressive population, and Saudi Arabia, I would bet on Iran. And I was talking to a banker yesterday in Canada.
Fred, we have just come to the first segment of our program. To end our first segment, we'll be right back. This is Open Up.